Welcome to Business Amplified with host Kevin A. Dunlap.
This podcast is for small business owners aiming to amplify their enterprises.
Explore strategies to play a bigger game by becoming an author, public speaker, podcast host, or expanding your brand in other ways.
Elevate your business on Business Amplified.
Well, hello everybody. This is Kevin Dunlap with Business Amplified, and today we are going to be going again across the pond for a gentleman by the name of Faris. Now, we've had a previous conversation, and this guy was extremely interesting, so I wanted to make sure that he was going to be on our show. So today, welcome Faris. How are you today?
Thank you, Kevin. It's a real pleasure to be with you and the listeners, viewers. I'm super excited about our chat today.
Same here. So Faris, tell us about yourself. Who are you? What is it that you do? And why is it that you do what you do?
Yeah, great questions, and so much wrapped up in those little questions. So I'm Faris. I run a company called Sheer Ghetto Consulting, which is all about sharpening the strategic effectiveness of companies. So what I love doing is going in and working with teams to get them to make better decisions and work together around their strategy. So we do that in one of two ways, either by actually being there and fixing things and getting people talking and challenging their biases, or by training leaders to do what we do, the skills they will need to be really effective around communication, influencing, those sort of things. So nowadays, I started this business 4 years ago. Nowadays, we work with 35 companies around the world, some big, some small, on these challenges, and it's a real pleasure. And you know what? I have a lot of fun doing it.
That's cool. The fact that you're able to work with companies, you said 35 countries around the world. How did you able to build an international business?
One brick at a time, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, Kevin. The business I built now, prior to setting up my own company, I was a consultant for 12 years. I was a partner in a consulting firm. So actually, I just leveraged my network. I worked with a lot of companies. I'm the kind of person who stays in touch with everybody. So I am going out there every day, meeting my old connections. And if you have good conversations, do you know what? One thing leads to another, and you end up becoming clients and that sort of thing. So that's how we've been able to do it in the last 4 years, and end up in random locations with different companies, and it's very enjoyable.
How did you actually get started in this business? Because obviously you did not start off being international. So how did you actually get started?
No, I made a lot of wrong mistakes when I got started, like any small business owner will tell you. I tried a variety of strategies to get through, but do you know what? My very first client that I won, Kevin, was someone I wasn't even on my radar. It was a gentleman from a French company who I had trained like 12 years before. He had come to one of my training sessions in a former life, and for him, it was a very, very impactful session. And when he saw that I set up my company, he immediately reached out and he said, look, I don't know if you remember me from 12 years ago, but you trained me in something that changed my career and really helped me reach the higher levels of things. And now I'm senior, I want to return the favor. So I want you to come and work with my company and train my juniors what you trained me 12 years ago. So, completely not on my radar, but what an amazing first client. He's still a client today. And it just goes to show, if you are memorable and you have made the difference in somebody's life, they will come back to you at some point.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that you said that, because you never know what kind of influences that you may have. And like you said, it's 12 years later. I know for me, I had a client of mine that I've not heard from in over 6 months. And he was a non-paying client at that time. But then he came back to me and said, hey, Kevin, this, what you told me is what I need to be doing. And then he ended up hiring me 6 months later. So I definitely see where you're coming from, because when you start making those let's call it the ripples in the pond, you have no idea what their what their recollection is. Because I know for me, as an example, as I'm building some of my current and upcoming webinars, that's based upon somebody I learned from 2 or 3 years ago. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure she probably has no idea that the seeds that she planted way back then is now just is sprouting the beautiful trees and whatever you want to call it, bushes that are now occurring in my life. So you have no idea what influences that you have. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and do you know what? You're absolutely spot on, Kevin. Very rarely do we get to know and find out years later. I actually started my career as a high school teacher, and do you know what? Now, 25 years later, many of my students find me thanks to social media and track me down. And it's like carrying on the story, seeing what happened to those kids that you knew years ago. They're now fully fledged adults with families. They're doing high paid jobs. And it's so nice to actually see the snapshot. And they often say, thanks to you for teaching me that stuff or helping me with that difficult thing that I didn't understand when I was a kid. But that's very rare because, people don't do that. They don't trace you down 20 years later to tell you a story. So what a privilege it is when somebody comes back after 6 months or 12 years.
Well, back in October 2021, I decided to go on a cross-country road trip, and I bought a car in Pensacola, Florida, which is Northwest Florida. I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and I decided to go on a road trip to drive for 2 weeks to drive the circumference of Florida. And my first stop was in Tallahassee, Florida, which is where I went to graduate school back in the mid 1990s. And I
Yeah.
went back to the old building that I used to be studying under my major professor. This happened to be on a Friday, and I found my major professor's office. And so I wrote a note says, "Hey, it's been 27 years or 25 years since we spoke." I said, "You made a huge influence on my life," and I slid the note under the door. Well, about 4 days later, on Monday, he gave me a call. But at that time, I was in Cape Canaveral, Florida, so I was much further away. But it was nice to have that conversation with my major professor. And at that time, he was saying, "I'm retiring at the end of this semester." So, he's imparted so much knowledge over the last 30 plus years, but he had a big
Yeah.
influence on me. That was 1997 to 2021. So that's what, 24 years later. So I mean, I don't
Amazing,
even know
isn't
if he even remember who I was, but he was a
it?
major influence in my life for 3 years.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And if I knew we could trace all the stories back, but just be grateful for the ones that you can pick up all those years later. A lot of the work that I do with teams and clients is about around emotional intelligence. Is that
Okay.
impact you're having on another human being? How important that is in leadership? How important it is with strategy? Because human beings, we can understand the logical side of something, but if the emotional side is not connected, we will resist, resist, resist. So factoring that in your decision making and your approach to leadership is super important.
Well, they also said that as well, because a lot of people don't realize just how much EQ or emotional intelligence
Yeah.
plays in your business life as well as even in your personal life. Because a lot of people, I don't know about it is how it is over there in the UK, but here in the United States, a lot of people that are not aware of this, they put that on a much lower level of significance, but did not realize just how important that actually is.
Yeah, I've met a lot of very good technical experts who don't necessarily have the EQ and the emotional intelligence. So, and then they get stuck in their rut and they get frustrated. Why are people not listening to me? I'm the expert. Why can't they get what I get? And it's not because of the knowledge. It's that engagement side of things.
Especially in today's world where with social media and all of that, we're more connected now, even remotely.
Yeah, even more remotely, like you say, we're more connected, but we're less connected. Thanks to social media, thanks to how busy life is. You literally, get what, 4 seconds to impress somebody. That's how long it takes for somebody to form an opinion of another human being. So, it's like walking a tightrope across the Grand Canyon. There's a lot of risk if you get it wrong, and you often don't think about it.
So how did you go from this, a teacher to running an
Yeah.
international business?
That's a great question. So I spent 5 years teaching, really enjoyed it, decided, though ultimately it wasn't going to be the career for me. So I started again. I remember trying to apply for jobs in the business world at the level that I thought I should do after 5 years experience as a teacher, and all of them rejected me. In fact, most of them just ignored me in my applications, I got a letter one day from an HR director saying, "Why did you apply for this job? You're a teacher. Stay being a teacher." So I realized, look, I'm going to have to start again from the bottom. So I joined a graduate scheme, even though I was much older than all the other graduates. And I joined an energy company, actually. So I learned all about the energy world, oil and gas, electricity and water. And I rose through the company and ended up in their strategy team. And from there, I was headhunted into strategy consulting, where I spent the next 12 years of my life, eventually making partner in a firm. And it was there that I got the inspiration to start my own business. So a bit of a roundabout route, but I definitely think what I do today is a combination of all those experiences and all those skills I learned along the way.
And I would definitely want to highlight what Faris just said right there was use your skills that you currently have, and we know whatever your background is, and start using that and start building from that. I know for me, just to give Faris a little bit of my background, is that when I finished high school, I ended up joining the United States Navy and ended up being stationed overseas in Japan for 4 years on two different ships. And then coming back, going to college, being a bartender, worked in the math lab, and then went to grad school. And then ended up becoming a beach bartender, a stunt performer, working as a college math teacher, and then also working in real estate. Now that I can compile all of these different little experiences that I have into something that I can grow and build from. Ferris did the same thing, because he ended up saying he was not qualified because he had a teaching background, and some HR person said, "Hey, you should stay in the teaching field." But he got into another job, and now he learned about the energy sector, and then using those skills to build what he has today. So I'm going to say I challenge the listeners and the viewers out there is to look at your background, follow like what I'm doing, follow what Ferris is doing, and use those skills to start building. What is that you want to do? Now, Ferris, share with the audience a little bit about some of the challenges that you went through. What were some of your biggest challenges, and what did you learn from those challenges?
I mean, challenges, we all hate them, right? At the moment that they happen, and we've all, I've had loads of them. But let's focus on, the business I'm building. And every day, in some respects, is a challenge as a small business, trying to get attention, trying to find clients. But probably the biggest challenge was 6 months in. Viewers, listeners who can do the math. Let me make it clear. I started the business in 6 months before COVID. So I had a little bit of runway. The business took off a little bit, and then overnight it just folded. Right, all our clients. I only had 4 at the time. All of them just went, "Nope, we're stopping the work." Right, 2 of them went bankrupt, so I never got paid. The other 2, it took them over 6 months to come back and say, "Okay, now we're ready to continue working." So for about 7 months, we had no money in the business. And I had to close things down effectively. Not just that, think about it, when you just started something, you're full of excitement, you're full of optimism, and then suddenly nothing. And I had to keep myself mentally entertained for that 6-7 months. And it was tough, right? We all had different challenges during COVID, but many days I'd be like, "Why am I doing this? What's the point?" But so that was a really big challenge. But you know what? I'm so glad I saw it through and had the resilience. So that, and not just that, I worked on the business even during those quiet times, so that when the world was ready to open up again, my business was there ready to launch again. So we had the 2.0 version of the company, a year later, and fortunately that version is doing well today. But it was a big thing to overcome.
And thank you for sharing that, because the world will throw you some challenges just to see how committed you are to your business. I know my real estate business, I started that in 2004 when I first moved to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And it was a lease option company. So basically what it meant was I was connecting owners with tenant buyers. So the tenant buyer would come to me and say, "Hey, I need help buying this house. an investor will come in and buy the house for them on their behalf, and then they'll go into a lease option contract for them, at a elevated price, 25, 30, 35% elevated price, and that tenant buyer will have the right to buy that house. Well, that was
Yeah.
in 2004. Well, in 2008, we had this thing called a housing crunch, where so basically the values of houses, at least in Las Vegas, dropped between 35 and 50%. That is a business model that does not work when you're depending upon appreciation. The thing was,
Yeah.
at that point, like, how can I still do my business? How do I restructure my business in order to still do my business? COVID was another example. Right now, as at the time of the recording of this video, is that we're dealing now with AI. How does artificial intelligence, it may have taken away a lot of people's jobs, but how can you adapt to that new world technology to be able to make it affordable to you? For an example, like when Faris was talking about, he started a business when he said 6 or 7 months before COVID, not realizing that COVID was coming around the corner. And then when COVID happened, like, okay, how can I restructure? Or how can I use this downtime to do something different? And the fact that he stuck with it, the fact that you're resilient and you stuck through it, has made you a lot more successful now, because you are able to adapt to that new world that we all are currently living in.
Yeah, yeah, completely, right? I think we're all like a piece of elastic, and we don't know how far we can stretch until we've been stretched there, and then that becomes our new benchmark. So now I say to new business owners now, like, and as I'm sure you do, oh, it's not like '08, right? I know I survived that, so I'll be okay now with whatever this challenge is. But if you haven't been through that, you think, oh my God, how do I deal with this? So actually, a good challenge is just recalibrating our amount of stretch sometimes, but we don't realize it at the time.
Well, there's one of my favorite books. It's an autobiography. I don't know if you've heard of this book or not. It's called "Losing My Virginity." Have you heard of that book?
No, I haven't. I haven't. Tell me about it, Kevin.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the best biographies out there. So, "Losing My Virginity" is written by Sir Richard Branson. It's all about the
Okay. Yeah.
Virgin Empire,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he talks about in one of the stories that he told us in his book, like, how can I use adversity to my benefit?
Yeah.
And when he was in college, or I forget, I don't know how the people in the UK call it, but when he was in college, he wanted to be a journalist, and he's created a newspaper called Student. And Student
Okay.
was a newspaper that was linking Cambridge and all the other major universities in the UK. And then he said, well, he realized that at one point in time that all the record stores at that time were in these dingy little sub basements of a department store. And he said, you know what? Let me start a mail order business where people can buy records online or through my newspaper. And since he already had a newspaper, he had a great venue. So he started his record selling business at that point in time. And then at some point in time, guess what happened? The postal workers went on strike.
Oh,
So when
okay.
you got a
Yeah.
mail order business and there's no postal workers, your business is belly up.
Yeah. Completely.
But he used that as inspiration to do something different. So I don't know, I don't remember the name of the street, but it's a major street in London where
Yeah.
where all the shops, with the
Yeah.
most
Oxford
successful
Street,
shops are.
it would be
Oxford
called. Yeah.
Street. Okay.
Yeah.
And he ended up finding a shoe store that was not using their second floor. So he
Okay.
says, hey, if you let me rent the second floor, all the people that are buying records from me have to go through your shoe store, so you can get a lot more foot traffic. And
Yeah.
that was the very first Virgin record store, all because
Okay.
of the mail strike of a mail order business. So how
Yeah.
can you use any adversity to your benefit?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. There is no such thing as a bad, why waste a bad situation is what I say. And just today, I was telling a friend, one of my mantras that I use to inspire myself and think differently is, what would your nemesis do if they were in charge of your business? Right? What would the evil genius whose downfall is to beat you, what would they do? Right? They'd do that. Right. And they will think creatively. They will think of all the ways. So yeah, there is no such thing as a crisis that can't be used in some form or another.
Even like when you were talking about COVID in 2020, that was the perfect example of a business going online.
Yeah, yeah,
COVID was probably, if you had a business like that, hey, let's do educational training online. Then
yeah.
during COVID, when everything was shut down, that yeah, I'm not sure those people's businesses skyrocketed.
They went skyrocket. And I'll tell you a funny thing, because before COVID, all my work was in person. Get me in a room
Hmm.
with a bunch of executives. I will, get them to do stuff. It'll be very experiential as well. And then obviously moved online. So I was like, okay, let's work out how to do this online. And I always remember I took on a new client who asked me to deliver a training program that they had already developed. And so I delivered it using the techniques that I learned about how to make an impact online. And the client rang me up the next week and said, something unbelievable has happened. And I said, what's that? And she said, you scored 10 out of 10 from every participant. I said, okay, that's great to hear. She said, no, you don't understand. When we used to run this in person, we never got a score higher than an 8. How the hell did you give a better experience online than in person? I said, oh, right. Well, that's really great to hear, right? Because, I'd basically taken the virtual world and dismantled it, thinking about the emotions people have on a call when they're learning, and then flipped it around. How can I make that experience? And then actually that created an opportunity to go in and teach people how to do that. So I suddenly found a new training course, how to lead online. And I started selling that to leaders. So yeah, like you say, there's always a perfect opportunity.
There's in any adverse situation, there's always an opportunity to be had.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I agree with that,
So,
Kevin.
so Ferris, tell us about some of your successes. Because you've been in business, you said a little more than 40 years. So tell us about some of those the successes that you've had from the actions that you've taken.
Yeah, so the successes, are varied. What I love about my business today is we work with such a variety of companies. We work with like Amazon and Heineken, but we also work with startups and scale-ups. And some of the greatest, what I consider success is when you get that team aligned and you get that aha moment, as I call it. And actually, it reminds me a lot of being a school teacher. That moment when you could see a student get a concept for the first time, and you realize, aha, their life would be different from that point. Often it's the same. I work with teams, and I can tell you lots of stories, from the trading team that I worked with, who, when we started, they actually physically disliked each other. And this was impacting their ability to make successful trades, ironically. Um, and through a process of working with it, we got them so much closer. So A, they actually began to like each other's company, but B, the resulting impact on their trading performance was an improvement of 6%, which was tens of millions of dollars. Right. And what made me most happy about that wasn't the increase in money, was that actually this group now really got on. But actually, for their boss, he just cared about the money, which was part of the problem. He really wasn't a people person. So I love stories like that. Or I love the startup that we worked with where it was a bunch of very technical people and they were struggling to talk to each other and agree, because their perfect day was just head down building stuff. But actually, you reach a point where you need to talk and communicate. So actually coaching them on how to do that, and be better leaders, had such an impact for all their employees. So it's stuff like that that really I enjoy, and for me are the success stories. But obviously, it has a material impact, like with that trading team, on the actual financials of the business. So that's also a win.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that because a lot of people are just looking at the bottom line, not thinking about the people that are involved in getting them to that bottom line,
Yeah.
and it is because when you start talking about the company culture and the interconnectedness of the actual people that are involved, that is, in my opinion, is one of the most important aspects. So thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. It is a big factor, and it does sadden me a little bit. Like I often say to people, like, companies don't pay me to make their employees feel better or get on. They pay for those actual outcomes. It just so happens that's what I do along the way to get those outcomes. So yeah, it'd be nice if people remembered that upstream a bit more.
Well, and I know, and I'm going to assume a lot of the viewers and listeners of the show would concur, is that they've been in those trenches with those other people. I know I've been in those trenches with those other people, or upper management that didn't really care about the people. They just want to say, "Hey, we want to look to be, we want to be the best in the country for this particular project, and like, and this, let's get it done." And then we accept, then we exceed their expectations, and by exceeding their expectation was still not good enough.
Yeah, that's true. It becomes a thankless task sometimes, but yeah, we've all had those kind of bosses.
And the thing is, if you're starting your own business, if you're running your own business, think about those people that are helping you get to where you're going. I don't care if it's your employees, if it's going to be your vendors, or whatever it is. Like, how can we make this a cohesive environment? Because once people are working together toward that common goal, and they even, and I would take this one step even further, they understand the why they're doing what they need to be doing. Then they're going to be more committed and actually want to be part of the whatever you want to call it, the successes of that project.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
So let me ask you this: how did you go from being a one-on-one or in person to being an international influence? I know you told us about the guy from France, but
Yeah.
what made you decide that, hey, I can go international?
Well, like, we're only bounded by our own imaginations now. I think a lot of it was that in my previous careers, I'd been international. So when I was a high school teacher, I actually taught in different countries. So I've always been kind of wedded to that. And when I was a consultant, I'd be forever on a plane working. So actually, a lot of my network was international. But also, I didn't put those limitations in my head. So when the first, I'll tell you a funny story, Kevin.
Sure.
I worked for a client here in the UK, and that went very well. And he subsequently got promoted in his company for a big global consumer company, and he got transferred to the US to take up a senior position there. And I didn't hear from him in 2 years, and then he rings me out of the blue after 2 years, and he said, "Hey, Faris, I don't have much time. I've got a couple of questions for you. Question number one: do you have a US operations? In the 2 years that I haven't seen you, have you created a US operations?" And me being a consultant, I said, "Of course I have." And he went, "I know you're lying to me right now, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt." He said, "I've got a problem over here in the US, which is very similar to the problem you helped me with in the UK. Are you up for coming over here and helping me fix it?" If I'd had a closed mindset, I would have said, "Well, that would cause logistical problems. But I said, "Yeah, I'll be there. When are we doing it? How are we going to do this?" Right. And then I was like, "I'll work out the logistics, because I can't leave my clients here stranded." But I was like, I'm not going to miss this opportunity to build something in the US and have this. So that's always been my mindset. And so last year that took us to go and do work in Africa, over in the Far East, to do a bunch of stuff in the States, which if I'd been, had a different mindset, I would have said, "Do you know what? I don't think it's for us." But we're much richer for having done that.
Well, and again, I'm glad you said that as well, because if you do read the book "Losing My Virginity" by Richard Branson, he always says, "Say yes, figure out the how later."
Exactly.
You're a perfect example of that. If somebody gives you an opportunity that's going to push your comfort zone, say yes to it, and then figure out how you're going to do it at a later time.
Yeah. It's a great mantra. It's the same as ask forgiveness, not permission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, go push yourselves and great things will happen, is what I firmly believe. And I do that in my own life, Kevin. I'm the kind of idiot who every month will set myself a little challenge, pick up a new hobby, learn something different, just for the sake of doing it, because I always find that I get some benefit, even if I don't keep doing that hobby. But I've learned something along the way. I've challenged myself, and it's about that, keep stretching my own elastic band or rubber band, so that in the future, when I have to, when somebody else makes me, I'm already used to those comfort levels.
And the thing is, you can always learn from something, by starting that new hobby or starting that new activity, because you never know when that skill set is going to become useful at a later time. Like, for an
Yeah.
example, when I decided to do my very first podcast, I did a lot of editing using Audacity, using sound editing programs back in 2017 and 2018. Not to realize that in 2022, when 4 years after I gave up my program, that when I started doing my first online course, like, oh, I already know how to edit audio. I already know how to do this. It's been a few years, but now I use that skill set from years prior to doing something that I'm doing now. So look at your skill sets or do something new. You never know when that's going to become something that's going to be beneficial. Here's another example I know for me in pre-COVID, just to make a little extra money, I started doing some Uber driving. And
Okay.
it was surprisingly how just driving for Uber, something's very simple. You apply, get your car inspected, and now you're going to go pick up and transport people. You learn like, oh my gosh, all these other these incredible events are going on in a town that I just did not know what was going on. And I met people from all across the world just from doing that in 2018. So it doesn't really matter, what it is that you're doing. You can always learn something from that.
Yeah, you're so right, Kevin.
Now, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that can help them push their comfort zone besides saying yes to an opportunity to have them to push their comfort zone
Yeah.
that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm gonna, what I'd like to share with your audience is the way I look at life and the way that I work with clients is I encourage them to look across three pillars in all that they do. And the three pillars are IQ, EQ, and FQ. And I'll just briefly touch upon those. So IQ is, do they have the intelligence quotient, right? But it's all around strategy. Do they have the right ideas? Do they have enough of them? Have they stress tested them to make sure that they are going in the right direction? They pick the right option. So that is one area if you're not very good to work on. The next area is the EQ, the emotional intelligence, being able to take others with you on the journey. Because an idea is just a piece of paper if other people aren't bought into it. So how you communicate, how you work with people, really important. And if you're not very skilled there, which a lot of us aren't as good as we could be, then you should dedicate time to improving there and pushing your comfort levels. And then the third pillar that a lot of people are completely unaware of is this focus quotient. Are you able to focus on the important things and get them done? Okay. And that's not just a matter of will, right? A lot of it is to do with prioritization. Too many of us do too many things, right? So prioritizing, applying systems thinking, looking at what might go wrong, removing that ahead of time is the sort of stuff that I do with companies and individuals. So I always say, look across your three pillars, which is your weakest, because you need all three. You can't sort of coast through life just on one of them, and push yourself there would be my advice.
Okay, so the IQ, the EQ, and the FQ. That's
Yeah.
very good. Now,
Thank you very much.
if one of our listeners or audience members wants to work with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, the two best places to get hold of me is one of it is come and visit our website. So the company, as I said, is called Sheer Ghetto, which I'm sure, Kevin, you'll put in the notes so people can find. But Sheer Ghetto is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone, because just like a sharpening stone sharpens a knife, Sheer Ghetto, the company, sharpens other companies. So that's what we do. Or come and find me on LinkedIn. There's only one Faris Aranki. I'm there every day. I post every day little tips, and I reply to every email. So come and find me, and I'd love to carry on the conversation.
And what's that URL? How do you spell that? In case somebody doesn't speak Japanese.
Yeah, SHIAGETO. So sheerghetto.com.
Okay. And then and the spelling of your name?
My name, Faris, is like the capital of France, but with an F. So Faris. And the surname is Aranki.
So that's Faris Aranki, or Aranki, or Faris Faris Aranki on LinkedIn. You can find him on there, and the other one is Share Gato. So thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we leave today?
No, it's just been a real pleasure, Kevin. I got the feeling you and I could have spoken for a couple of hours. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I like to keep these shows between 30 and 40 minutes just so that so the audience can listen to it on their commute to work or as they're cleaning their house or something along those lines. And also,
Yeah.
if anybody out there has feel that they would like to be a part of the show or know someone that would like to be part of the show, just go to our scheduling website at businessamplified.net/pre-interview. Now, Ferris, thank you for being on the show. Any last words before we go?
No, everybody have a great day and hopefully see you over in the US soon.
We'd love to see you over here as well. Thanks, Ferris. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to another empowering episode of Business Amplified with Kevin A. Dunlap.
If you found value in today's insights, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast.
Keep amplifying your business. And remember, your success journey is our inspiration.
Until next time on Business Amplified, go out there and make your business thrive.